Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Daniela Pirraglia. I'm an associate registrar here at Innis College. I'm also our financial aid advisor. And so what that means is I manage all of the awards that we have here at Innis specifically. I also manage our grant program, and I also assist students with their student loan applications, mostly OSAP because that's what I'm most familiar with personally. I had OSAP as a student, but I can also sometimes assist with other student loan applications, or at least help you figure out where to get the information that you're looking for. So if you ever have a question about anything to do with money, then I'm the person that you should reach out to. And if you ever ask Jack at our front desk, the registrar.innis email, if you ask him a money question, that's fine as well. Sometimes he's able to answer it, and if he's not, he'll pass it along to me anyways. Okay. So the goals of our session, the goals of our session today are to help you understand your university costs, such as how your tuition fees are charged, get you familiar with your refund schedules, the payment deadlines, how to actually technically pay your fees. I also want to help you understand what financial resources are available to you throughout the university, from perhaps outside of the university, and then we'll also go over some tips for budgeting for the school year. So the first thing I want to talk about are program fees versus course fees. What you should know is that all students are initially charged a program fee regardless of course load. So when your fees are assessed, you should see your invoice on Acorn with like actual numbers in there right now. There's probably not much in there right as of today, but next Monday, I believe it's the 17th, that is when, or the 19th, something like that, that is when you will be able to see how much you are being charged for the upcoming school year. And so automatically all students are charged a flat fee. And I have a slide that on the next page that will show you the exact numbers that will be charged. And that fee is appropriate if you are in 4 to 6.0 full credit equivalents. There is an opportunity to be charged what's called course fees. And so if you are charged course fees, then you pay by the individual number of courses that you're taking. The only way to be eligible for that is if your course load for fall winter is at 3.5 full credit equivalents or less. There is an exception for commerce students in year 2 and above, but because it's in a future year, we're not going to worry about that right now. For all students in first year, it's 3.5 FCEs or less. The really important thing to know about the course fee calculation is that how it is charged is based on very specific dates. So for your F and Y courses, whatever courses you are in as of September 20th, those are locked for the purposes of the course fee versus program fee calculation. And then for your S courses, they are locked as of January the 21st, 2024. And so whatever courses you happen to be in on those 2 dates, for the purposes of this calculation, they basically get frozen in time. And so even if you drop a course, say on September 30th, you drop an F course or a Y course even, for the purposes of this calculation, it still counts. It's even though you've dropped it, it still counts for that calculation. And so I think if you ever have any questions of that, please come to the registrar's office so that we can help you sort that out. It can be a bit confusing. If some people might wonder, like, why would I do that? Why would I pay program fees versus course fees? And so, if money is a concern and you're looking for a way to like reduce your costs, then being in course fees is one way that you could pay less. Obviously, if you are getting a student loan from OSAP or another province, then that may mean that your loan is a little bit less. So that's just something to consider. You may also have other personal responsibilities. Maybe you're working significantly and you're not sure how you're going to manage school and work. So these are all things that you can consider in making this decision, whether you should be program fee or course fee. I think 99% of you are probably going to be program fee, especially in first year. But if you are considering this as an option, then please reach out to me and we can have a meeting to talk about, what the options are. And the other thing to know about this calculation is that the faculty does do an automatic calculation in February after that January lock date. And so if you do nothing, but you are technically eligible, then you will see your fees go down in February automatically. So it is something that you can opt into, but if you are eligible, it will be done for you, down the line. But like I said, for most students, I think especially in first year, you probably will be in program fees. So these are the fees for 2023, 2024. They actually were like, I went into the website today to get the updated numbers, and so they are here now. So there are three different categories of students. So there's domestic Ontario students, and you can see here, I've listed the program fee and then the per course fee if you happen to be in per course. But again, most of you are probably going to be in program fee and then pay your full-time incidentals. For non-Ontario residents, it's 6,590 plus the incidentals. And then for international students, you can see here, it's 60,510 plus the incidentals, which you can see here, they're the same regardless of whether you're domestic or international. But international students also have to pay UHIP, which is an additional $756 charge, and that is an annual charge that you pay. I have the link here where you can go to see these schedules, see the refund schedules. The refund schedule isn't yet posted, but all that information can eventually be found at this link. So here are the payment deadlines for the upcoming year. I've called them tentative because when I was preparing this presentation last week, a lot of these deadlines weren't there yet. And so, I work here, I'm familiar with what the deadlines typically are. And so I've gone ahead and filled those in. But just know, like, I could be off by like a day or something, like say for a service charge date. But generally speaking, these should be relatively accurate. The pay or defer date of August 30th is correct. That is the day that you have to either pay your minimum balance to register, which you will see on your invoice on Acorn, or you trigger registration either through an OSAP or out of province loan deferral, or possibly there may be some of you with an award deferral, which I have some information on a later slide. And so you'll see here, there's two sets of dates. There's the dates, the most common dates for students with an OSAP or out of province loan deferral, and then students with no deferral. So for the OSAP and out of province loan deferral, so the deadline to pay your fees is September 30th. So typically when a student's receiving OSAP, they defer their fees on Acorn because they're getting OSAP, and then their OSAP comes in September. With OSAP, for full-time OSAP anyways, it does go directly to your fees. And if there's any balance remaining for the fall term, you are responsible for paying that. So for students who are in residence, you would need to make a payment. There's no way that your OSAP in fall would be enough to cover all your fall fees, including residence. So September 30th is the day that you want to pay everything. The consequence of being registered and not paying your fall balance in full is that service charges will begin on unpaid fall and tuition and non-tuition, so probably residence, incidentals, etc., an amount of 1.5% per month. And that is compounded over the year. And so it ends up being 19.5 something percent over the course of a year. It is like a credit card, so it is in your best interest, if at all possible, to pay your fall fees in full by the September 30th deadline. And then the deadline to pay your winter term tuition is the end of January. And so again, your OSAP or your out of province loan comes in, you pay your winter fees, you pay whatever balance is owing, and you want to do that by the end of January to avoid the February 15th service charges. And then finally, at the end of April, that's the deadline to pay all your fees in full for the whole year in order to make sure that you don't have a financial hold placed on your account and to allow you to register in future sessions. For students who don't have a student loan, don't have an award deferral, so you have triggered registration by making a payment, the deadline is the same, so you still pay or defer by August 30th. You pay your fall fees in full by September 30th to avoid the October 16th service charge deadline. The main difference between these two sets of dates is this one. So your winter fees are due by November the 30th in order to avoid the December 15th service charge. And again, everything that was, you were charged for during the year is due by April 30th in order to avoid the recording of a financial hold on your file. So there are a few different ways to pay your fees. I say the most common is probably paying within Canada using online banking. And so I have information on the next slide about how to do that technically speaking. Some students prefer to print their invoice. You print your invoice off of Acorn and you bring it into a bank and you say, I want to, pay for this. There is the option to pay online with your credit card. The thing to know about that is that there is a 2.5% convenience fee. And so, sometimes people have point cards and they want to, collect points. I don't think you'll get 2.5% back in points. I think that's really unlikely. So just from a financial standpoint, personally, I would say, try not to use your credit card unless it's absolutely necessary. And then there's also this option for these TD reward travel points where you can, if you or your parents have these points, you may be able to use them to pay for school. And there's a link here. For students who are outside of Canada who don't have haven't maybe come here yet, and so they don't have a local bank account here yet, you can pay with, it's called Convera or Flywire. And there is information on this link here, right here, where you can find more information about how to do that. The university does not accept wire transfers. They don't accept bank drafts. And so it would really be these two options if you are outside of Canada and don't have a local bank account yet. And then, yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is if you do have OSAP, or an out of province loan, you should be able to defer your fees on Acorn. So you need to do that to trigger your registration and then make your payment in September once you have your money. Okay. So this is just the top, this is a sample of the top of what's on your Acorn invoice. And the reason I've highlighted that is just want you to see what your account number is. If you are paying online through a bank. And so it's not just your student number, it's a combination of your last name and your student number. And I believe this is the only place where you can find this information. And so, yeah, it's on your invoice. If you are paying online, I would just go copy it right from here and paste it into your online banking. The payee is the University of Toronto. And then it's added just like any other bill that you might pay online, and you can make tuition fee payments like that. So these are just some, useful tips around refund deadlines. So again, you are going to remain in program fees unless you drop under 4.0 FCEs by the appropriate deadlines. So remember, for F and Y courses, it's that date, I think it was September 20th, in and around there. And then for S courses, it's January 21st. Depending on what happens, if you drop all your courses and your registration is canceled, then there is also a refund schedule for that. The refund percentage will vary based on your drop dates. Again, if you're in course fees, then there is a refund schedule for that, and how much you get back is dependent on what dates you drop those courses. It's important to keep track of your waitlisted courses, because if you do get into a waitlisted course and you are paying course fees, then your invoice will change, right? Your fees will go up, and so it's just really important that if you are on waitlisted courses before waitlists are turned off, just to keep an eye on that. And if you're not sure about how your fees and how changing your course load will affect them, please ask us, and we can help. We can help assist you. The main thing to know is that the deadlines to get money back happen quite early in the term. And so it's really important to, if at all possible, to make those decisions around what courses you're taking, especially in terms of, the impact on your finances. It's important to make those decisions as early in the term as possible, whenever possible. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about resources. And so here's a list of, all types of resources that you may or may not have access to. And so, there's family support. You could have provincial student loans, whether that's OSAP or an out of province student loan. Some students have RESPs, scholarships. UTAPS is a U of T grant that we're going to spend a few slides talking about in a bit. Some students do work during the school year. Sometimes students ask us, like, is it doable? Should I work? Can I work? Generally speaking, we recommend students not work in first year, but obviously there are exceptions to that rule. I think if you are interested in working, then work study, which is a program through the University of Toronto, is a good option, because It means that someone here at the university is your employer. And, speaking from personal experience, I am an employer to students. And, we know that there are times when you're going to be busy, where you have exams, you have assignments, and maybe you need to reduce your work hours. And so I always tell students, if you are really interested in working, then working on campus is a good place to start. Some students have a student line of credits. And finally, we have a local grant program, which we will talk a little bit about later. Okay, so I'm going to spend a slide here talking about scholarships. So admission scholarships have been sent out. And so for most students, if you were getting a scholarship, you would have been notified within your offer letter. And so if you if you haven't been notified about a scholarship yet, then chances are most likely you did not receive an admission scholarship. However, there are scholarship opportunities that you might be eligible for during your time at U of T. Scholarships that consider your accomplishments while at U of T are called in-course scholarships, or sometimes they're called returning scholarships. And they're often based on one or more of the following things: could be marks, extracurricular leadership, a piece of academic work, financial need, etc. We have some leadership awards here at Innis that require an application. And you can see here, again, these slides will be posted online. I'm not going to click on this right now, but we do have some Innis leadership awards. So for students who are involved either at Innis or at U of T or in the external community, there are awards that you should look into applying. The applications will come out in February, and we do send emails specifically about these awards once they are available. Especially for students who, if you're in residence and you're really involved in the residence, then we have quite a few awards that are specific to the residence as well. And then we have a tool at U of T called Award Explorer. So this is browsing thousands of awards across all of U of T. If anyone has looked at the tool already, it is a bit of a cumbersome tool. I promise it's better than what it used to be, because what it used to be is you'd have to go to each individual website. And so sometimes you don't even know like where to even start looking. And so the tool is great, but you do need to do a bit of filtering to shrink your list down to, so that you're only looking at things that you might actually be eligible for. And if at any point anyone wants to meet with me, we can walk through how to use that tool. That is definitely something that I can assist with. So OSAP. OSAP is an Ontario Student Assistant Program. It is a joint federal provincial aid program for students attending college and university. In order to be eligible for OSAP, you do need to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or a protected person. You also have to have Ontario residency. And what that means is you have to have lived in Ontario for at least a year without attending full-time post-secondary school. So what that means is if you say are from another province, say you're from BC and you're coming to Ontario to do school, you wouldn't be eligible for OSAP. You would have to apply for BC student aid. If you're a student from, say, the States who has Canadian citizenship, then the best thing to do would be have a conversation with me, and we can figure out, is it OSAP that you apply to, or is it another province, depending on you and your family's residency history. So in terms of OSAP specifically, your eligibility depends on your personal financial situation. So it'll look at, your family's income, family size, so the number of dependents, how many kids are in school, what's the living situation? Are you living off campus, on your own? Are you living in residence, or are you going to be staying at home living with your family? The OSAP also looks at your course load. So are you full-time or you're part-time? You do need to maintain satisfactory academic progress. So typically what that means is staying in and passing at least 3 courses per term. That's what OSAP considers to be full-time. So 3 courses per term. There is an exception if you have a permanent or persistent prolonged disability. But again, if that applies for you, then I would say you can always have a conversation with me. We can talk a little bit more about that. And then OSAP looks at your educational expenses. So how much is your tuition, your books, your living expenses? The thing to know about OSAP is that they look at average living expenses across Ontario. And so OSAP alone will not be enough to cover your school, especially if you're living off campus. If you're living at home, then possibly, but if you're living off campus, then most likely you will need other resources, which we'll talk about what those could be. So OSAP consists of grant and loan portions. How much loan you get versus grant is obviously very dependent on your personal financial situation. I see some students who have all loans versus students who have all grants, and then a wide spectrum in between. It's released in 2 installments, so you normally get a little bit more in the fall and then a little bit less in the winter. Your loans remain interest-free while you're in school full time and don't have to be repaid until you're done. Grants in general don't have to be repaid unless there are some specific scenarios where maybe you misreported income, or you dropped courses and your tuition changed, then there could be impacts on your grants, or possibly if the parental income isn't able to be verified or it's higher than what you reported. So yeah, it's important to be as like accurate as possible when you do your OSAP application, just to prevent there being changes done to your OSAP down the line. And the ministry does do checks on the income amounts that you submit. And so if there are changes, it's best to report them to the university registrar's office. I have their links down here. So they have an email, and then this link also takes you to their contact page where you can see their phone number. They also have a front desk that you can walk in and ask questions. Okay, and one more thing just I want to add about loans remaining interest fee as long as you're in school full time. So the main thing is you can't take off more than 6 months in between full time study periods. And so for most students, they finish in April, they come back in September, they're off on summer break for 4 months. That's fine. When you come back to school, if you have OSAP again, or if you tell OSAP through a specific form, hey, I don't have OSAP, but I am back, I'm full time, then your loans will remain in interest free status. So the way that full-time OSAP works is the money that you get from OSAP is automatically goes to your tuition fee first. This happens in the fall and in the winter. So if your OSAP funding is greater than your fees for the term, then the rest will get deposited to you specifically into your bank account using whatever bank account you used on your OSAP application. If your OSAP funding is less than your fees for the term, then you are responsible for paying the difference. And the deadline to do that for September for the fall fees is September 30th. So I have a couple of examples here. You can see here the fall OSAP was 7,000, the tuition was roughly 4,000, and so the amount that the student is getting to their bank specifically is $3,000. In the second case, the student is only getting $2,500. Again, their tuition is 4,000, and so the student would be responsible for paying the $1,500 by the September 30th date. And I also have a link here to the U of T information on how to add direct deposit to your account. This is separate from whatever account you used to register for OSAP, but if you ever do have a credit in your U of T account and you want to get a refund to you directly, then you should add direct deposit. So just a little plug for that. So these are screens that show you how the tuition fee deferral works. And so there's two kinds of deferrals. There's one through OSAP or other provincial student aid, and then there's a scholarship deferral. So here is the OSAP deferral. I have a link here that has some more information about how to do that, but it is available through Acorn in the finances section. And if you applied for OSAP, then you should be able to use this deferral tool automatically. If you applied for an out of province student loan, then there may be some extra work that you have to do in order to make the online deferral work for you. And so you can find information about that on this link. And then for a scholarship fee deferral, this is for students who are receiving an award that is more than their minimum payment to register. And so let's say for a domestic student receiving a U of T scholar, it's $7,500, then you would likely be able to defer your fees based on this. If you are an international student receiving one of the larger international scholar awards, as long as your award is more than your minimum payment as listed on your invoice, then you can defer your fees. And so the way to do this deferral is so unfortunately, when I prepared the presentation, the form wasn't available yet, but it will be here within this link. And if you can't find it, then email us and we should be able to send it to you. But basically, you fill out that scholarship deferral form, you email it to us, registrar.innis, include your invoice and award letter, I should say later, no later than August the 30th, so that we can trigger your registration for you. The nice thing about a scholarship deferral is that it does mean mean that you have until the end of April 2024 to pay your fees in full. So there's no service charges if you have that scholarship fee deferral until after April. So just some general resource tips here. Apply as soon as possible to ensure that you receive your funding by September and to be able to defer your fees. So if you are applying for OSEP and you haven't done it yet, then I ask that you do it now. It can take 6 to 8 weeks to process your application, and in August especially, you can expect delays. And if there's anything at all complicated about your application, it's always better to have more time. And so, yeah, definitely start that application now if you haven't already. If something's changed, you can let OSEP know by uploading documents to your OSEP application. That's the best way to make a change. And so you can do that right through the OSEP portal. If you don't understand your assessment and you have specific questions, then I recommend you contact the University Registrar's office at osep.staff because they can actually access your application. I can see a little bit of information, but I don't have access to your full application. So they're the best people to talk to about that. You have an OSEP message center, so it's really important that you check that regularly. There could be messages that the university is sending to you, and they would be going there, and you should get an email saying there's a message. And so I always tell students to make sure you check those messages. If you get a message and you're like, I don't understand this, you can always ask me and send me the message, and I can help you, parse what the University Registrar's Office is trying to tell you. And if you are asked for documentation, so it's important to submit it right away so there's no delays in your funding. And again, don't forget to defer your fees to complete your registration. So here are some general tips for out-of-province students if you're applying for a student loan from your home province. Again, it's kind of the same. Apply sooner than later as application processing can take time. The University Registrar's Office has an out-of-province request portal. So depending on what province you're applying from, you can use this portal to submit certain loan application forms directly to the University Registrar's Office so that they can complete them. You can also use this portal to enable your ability to use the deferral that we talked about on Acorn. It usually requires you to submit the documents through the portal. And then again, if you have any questions, you can contact the University Registrar's Office. They have a service portal, so I've just linked it here. You can also ask me questions. Again, I'm not going to have access to your application, but if you're ever confused about anything, you come and talk to us and we can help you figure it out. So now I'm going to spend a few slides talking about UTAPS. UTAPS is a grant program that's offered by the University of Toronto. It is U of T's largest need-based support program, and it covers the financial gap between your actual education costs and the costs recognized by your provincial student aid financial program. So basically, UTAPS covers unmet need. Depending on when you apply, you could receive funding as early as October. If you are receiving a higher value grant, it could come in multiple installments. And this is new. Starting this year, all students must apply to UTAPS. It used to be that if you were receiving OSEP, you didn't have to, but now this has changed. And so everyone has to apply. So if you are getting a student loan, either from Ontario or another province, or if you have band funding, if you're Indigenous, you must apply for UTAPS. And not doing so could impact your ability to apply for a local grant here at Innis College, which I will talk about. So in terms of eligibility for UTAPS, you do have to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or a protected person, so similar to the requirements for OSAP. You do have to be receiving student government aid from your home province or territory, so OSAP, Student Aid BC, or if you're getting educational only funding for Indigenous students, and you have a remaining financial need or unmet need that's not met by these programs. You have to be enrolled in a UTAPS approved program, which in arts and science, all programs are eligible, and you have to be registered in a full-time course load per OSEP requirements during the fall and or winter term. So that would be at least 3 courses. Generally speaking, it's 3 courses per term. Again, if you have a disability that's recognized by OSEP, it could be 2 courses, but for the purpose of this presentation, let's just say it's 3 courses per term. So I've included the deadlines here if you're assuming you're enrolled in fall and winter terms, because again, most students here are going to be registered all year long. Just know that there could be different deadlines if you're here for just one term, if you're here for just fall or just winter. But again, assuming you're here for all year, for fall and winter. So for OSAP students, it's recommended that you apply by September 20th, 2023, but the absolute deadline is February 14th. And for out-of-province students and Indigenous sponsorship students, it's recommended you apply by November the 1st, and the absolute deadline is February the 7th. I am recommending that all students just apply in August, right? So whenever you finish your OSAP application or other provincial loan application, you should just go ahead and just do this now. The application is basically like a shortened version of an OSAP application. And so do it now while your OSAP application is still fresh in your mind. I've gone through it. It's relatively straightforward. It's asking a lot of the same questions that OSAP asks. And so I just really, 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 really recommend that you apply for UTAPs if you do have a student loan. And we're going to be sending lots of messaging about this because it is a change from previous years. And I'm sure the University Registrar's Office is also going to be sending messaging. If you do get UTAPs, again, it's a grant. It will go towards whatever fees are remaining on your invoice first before any money goes to you. But it is, again, it's a grant, it's quote unquote free money, so you don't have to repay it. And so it really is in your interest to apply if you do have a student loan. Okay, so we talked a little bit about part-time work earlier. So working is an option that you may want to consider. And so when I talked about work study specifically, you can access those jobs through a portal called CLNX. Those jobs will be available starting on August the 15th. I normally recommend to students that if you do see a posting that is really appealing to you, that you apply as soon as possible, regardless of when the deadline is. Like the hard deadline for the whole program, work study program, is like end of September. But again, speaking as someone who does hiring in our office, like we try to hire as early into September as possible. Some places will even be hiring in August before the year begins. And so if there is something that you're really interested in, I strongly encourage you to apply sooner than later. Possibly, get your resume ready in August before the application portal opens. And again, having seen lots of different, applications from many students over the years, I'll say that just putting like a little bit of effort in, making it as polished as possible. If you're asked to do a cover letter, do a cover letter. It doesn't have to be super specific, but if you can at least try to tailor it to every role you apply to, even just like a little bit, I think that goes a long way. So there are other loans that you may, want or need to consider. So you could, let's just say your OSAP assessment is really low, and you need to make up that difference. And normally for those situations, I recommend students consider a line of credit from a Canadian bank if you do need more funding. So there's going to be fewer rules. So they're not going to look at how you're doing in the academic year, but there's going to be more required from you in order to get that loan, most likely. So I would say for most students, you probably will need someone to co-sign, whether that's a parent or a family member or a friend, possibly. Most likely you won't qualify on your own. And we always recommend to shop around for the best interest rate, meet with your bank, meet with other banks. Your parents might have access to better rates than what you could access on your own. And so, a line of credit is something that some students have. The main shortfall of it is that you do probably most likely need to pay interest on any money that you actually use on a monthly basis. Whereas with OSAP, it's interest free as long as you're full time. So just something to keep in mind. I would always recommend getting a student loan before I recommend getting a line of credit. So I've talked a little bit, mentioned our Innis grant, and so I want to go into a little bit more detail about that. So we have a grant fund to help students dealing with a financial emergency or a shortfall during the fall-winter session. It's not something that we offer in the summer. It requires an application, which is available on Acorn, starting around October the 1st, I think. It's available to registered students who have exhausted all funding resources, and that could mean family support, savings, study period income, loans, UTAPs, etc. So basically, we expect students to make use of all resources that are available to them. And so that means taking your OSAP loan, for example. Sometimes I see students who are getting OSAP and they're getting OSAP loans and they're getting a grant and they've decided to decline the OSAP loan, which is totally fine. That's a choice that some students want to make. They don't want the loan. But then if you come to our office asking for additional financial support, the first thing we're going to say is that you need to take the loan first before we issue you an Innis grant. And the reason we do that is because we have a limited pool of money. The purpose of the grant is not to reduce debt, it's to help students pay for the things that they need. It's to help them pay for rent or pay for their fees or pay for food. And so that's why we ask students to make use of all their resources. UTAPs is another one, right? So if you have applied for an Innis grant and you haven't applied for UTAPs yet, then I would ask that you apply for UTAPs first. And sometimes I see students who are in like a real financial emergency and they need help right away. And that's something that we could definitely do, like maybe give you some money for the fall. And then in the meantime, have you apply for UTAPs and then I can always reassess your application, your Innis grant application for winter if you still have a shortfall, even after your UTAPS application has been assessed. Once you submit your application on Acorn, I will see it through, I have a portal that I go into every few business days. And so once I see that application, I will send you an email asking you to meet with me, and then we can meet either in person or online, whatever you prefer, to go over the details of what you submitted. And so now just have a few slides on budgeting just to talk about the various costs that you're going to encounter while you're here. So fixed costs are those that remain stable or predictable in your budget. So that's something like tuition, residence fees, your lease agreement. So, how much you pay for rent, your meal plan if you purchased it, your moving costs, could be transit possibly, like if you know that you always are going to get a transit pass, then transit could be a fixed cost as well. Your variable costs change from month to month and are a little bit harder to predict. So I would say the number one cost that I see the biggest variance on across student to student is food. And so food is something that, depending on if you're doing primarily grocery shopping or if you're eating out like multiple times a week, the food costs can really vary. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk about, what are some reasonable averages to aim at. Clothes, so, you might see a spike in clothes spending over winter because maybe, for some students, you're coming from a very warm climate and you need a really warm winter jacket while you're here in Toronto, and you need good winter boots and you need a hat and you need gloves and all that kind of stuff. And so I would expect to spend some money on clothes, especially if you don't already have those items. Entertainment, that's another thing where students, the sky is the limit. You could spend a little or you could spend a lot. The nice thing about Toronto is that there are some like free things or cheap things that you can do in the city. There's your toiletries, your laundry. A lot of you, especially if you're in residence, you're going to be on coin laundry. And again, transit costs, again, it could be fixed, could be variable. It just depends on what your situation is. And so here are some really rough cost estimates. This is based on, what I see from students' bursary applications and talking to students and, just my own personal experience and being a human and spending money. I think for food, anywhere between 300 and 450 a month is like reasonable. 450 a month is about $100 a week. And so if you're doing grocery shopping, you can eat pretty well for $100 a week. Obviously, if you're eating out, then that's not going to go very far. If you have the budget to spend more on food, then by all means, like you can do that. But that is something that we would limit in our grant application. Say if a student says to me, I'm spending $1,000 a month on food, I'm going to say we can't give you money to cover that kind of cost. Your personal care, so that's your toiletries, paper towel, shampoo, conditioner, soap, all that kind of stuff, anywhere from 20 to 50. Sometimes it's a little bit more depending on the student, but I would say definitely not more than 100. Your cell phone, if you're paying for it, 60 to 100 bucks. Books, I see a huge range on books. Like I see some students who I don't know how, but they're not spending any money on books, or maybe like a few $100s on books. Like 500 to 600 is probably on the upper end. I normally don't see students spending much more than that on books, but there are ways to save. There are used books, or you can take books out from the library if it's a book you only need for part of the term, that sort of thing. Transportation, so I've included the monthly TTC pass. If you have the student status, it's $128.15. And then entertainment, I mean, I think $100 a month is like a reasonable amount of money. You know, that's 25 bucks a week, or it could mean that you go out once every 2 weeks for 50 bucks. Like, it gives you a little bit of flexibility. And like I said, there are some free things that you can do here in the city. So, I mean, making a budget, I think people hear budget and they're like, oh God, what does that mean? And it feels kind of scary to them. This is something that you can always meet with me and we could work on together if that's appealing to you, either in the summer or during the school year. But even just have a rough guess as to, or an estimate as to what your expenses will be. I think a lot of times people, you don't add up all the things. And so it's good to just have an idea of what things will cost. There are lots of free budgeting spreadsheets or tools online if you want to get more fancy or less fancy. I have made a template which you'll be able to access here in this presentation, and I'm going to show you on the next slide what it looks like. And how to use it is you go to File, Save As, download a copy, and then you'll be able to edit it, because right now it's set to read only so that people don't, write over put their information in and then everyone can see it. And again, I'm available to help if you need it. I have a question. One sec. Yes, the slides will be shared. Yeah, the slides will be online, and this whole presentation is also being recorded and it will be online as well. Yeah, so you'll be able to click on all the links and everything. Okay, so there we go. So this is the budget that I have made. The way that this tool works is you can select fall, winter, or summer, and what changing that will do is it'll change the number of months that everything is multiplied by. And so in this case, because we're talking about fall, winter, I've set it to fall, winter, and you can see here, all of these are set to 8. I've included tuition for a domestic student, but obviously that might be different if you're international. I've included $500 in books. And then, if you were in if you were in residence, you could put residence here. So this column here is one time. That's what the OT stands for. It's a one-time cost. And then these fields here are a monthly cost. So anything you put in one of these fields will automatically take this number and multiply it by 8 to get this subtotal. And so that's why some things are on this side and some things are on this side. So again, tuition, it's a one-time cost. That's why it's there. If you're in residence, then you would put the one-time cost here and you would delete what's in the rent. And then you would have all your other expenses. So I've just included what I think are some relatively standard expenses. If you are living downtown, you're close to campus, so you're maybe walking some of the time. That's what this budget reflects. And then on the other side, I've included, again, the rule is the same. So these are one-time costs or one-time resources, and these are monthly resources. So, hopefully you have savings from summer or from previous years saved up. I know for OSAP, they assume that you're bringing in $3,500 or $3,600 to your OSAP application. And then I've included an amount for OSAP. I'm assuming the student is getting a little bit of UTAPs. I'm assuming the student is possibly working, making 500 bucks a month. So that's 4,000 over the course of the school year. And then the student is also getting $2,000 from family. And so you can see in this case, the student is just breaking even. So that's how this tool works. And again, you'll be able to access it through the slides, and we'll post a link to the spreadsheet so that if students do want to use it, you can. And I'm happy to meet with anyone who wants to make this budget together. So yeah, we are your reliable first stop, your registrar's office. So make an appointment to see an advisor if you want to talk about academic matters. Denise is probably the first person that you are going to meet because she works with first year students. And if you want to talk about money or awards or anything like that, then I would be the best person to talk to. And if you have questions about OSAP or UTAP specifically, you could try asking me, and depending on how complicated the question is, I might be able to answer it, or I might direct you to the university registrar's office, because they are the financial aid office. So whenever you see stuff on OSAP that talks about financial aid office, just know that U of T's university registrar's office is the financial aid office here at U of T. And that is it from me. I'm gonna stop recording and If I can figure out how to do that, just bear with me. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.